We have so many fantastic questions in the chat already, but we had a fantastic question from David about what the other uses are there for fungi besides as a food source. And we're so excited that we have a whole section about this that's coming up. And this is what Jessie is going to be talking about next. So I'd like to introduce Jessie. Jessie MacAlpine is a senior PhD student in the Cowen lab at the University of Toronto. Her research involves studying the interactions between human fungal pathogens and the friendly bacteria living in our bodies. In her spare time, Jessie loves the outdoors and spends most of her time hunting for mushrooms on hikes and trail runs. Thanks, Jessie.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Amanda. Hello, everybody. So I'm super excited to follow up on both JP and Joshua's talks. They gave lots of awesome examples of the many ways that fungi are good and bad. And now I'm going to give some extra examples of why we all love fungi. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the applications of various fungi, everything from the ones we eat and buy in the grocery store to the ways that they influence medicine and the drugs that we have available to us. So briefly, I'll just touch a little bit on me. So I study microscopic fungi, like the ones that Amanda introduced at the very beginning of the presentation. So I study fungal pathogens that infect humans. And specifically, I try to find new ways to treat these fungal infections by studying bacteria that are found in our body and trying to see if they create molecules that can affect the ability of fungi to cause disease. So I do this at the University of Toronto in the Cowen lab. In the middle here is a photo of the Cowen lab prior to COVID when we could all be maskless indoors. And I love my PhD and I love studying fungi. But when I'm not in the lab, usually what I like to do is be out in the forest looking for these examples of macroscopic fungi that, in my case, you can find all across Southern Ontario. And here's a few of the different spots that I've had throughout this summer. But today I want to focus a little bit on some of the applications of fungi. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is in this really awesome report that you can check out online if you're interested in learning more, that was done by the Kew Gardens. And it's the State of the World's Fungi report from 2018. And in this report, they cover all kinds of fantastic things from the applications of fungi to new species of fungi that have been discovered to some of the fungal biology basics that we've talked about today. So I'm going to start off with one of the very obvious ways that fungi impact our lives, and that's the fact that we eat lots of fungi. There's about 350 species that are currently eaten, but scientists predict that this is actually an underestimate as it can be quite difficult to get a grasp of the entire global consumption of fungi, especially in indigenous communities. And so here I've just highlighted a few of the examples that you might have eaten, either purchased at a grocery store or potentially foraged from around Ontario. So portobello mushrooms and cremini mushrooms are ones you might have bought in the store, along with oyster and enoki mushrooms. Chanterelles, morels, and lion's mane are frequently foraged around Ontario and around the globe as well. And JP gave a really good example of how really the fungi we eat is just a very small percentage of the amount of fungi that are globally available. And so this is only one way that they impact our lives, because fungi also help us make food. So there's fungi that we don't explicitly eat, or I guess we kind of do, usually on the microscopic end, that help us make all kinds of different food groups. So baker's yeast helps us make things like bread and beer and other alcoholic beverages, as well as yeast spreads like Marmite and Vegemite, found in Australia and the UK. Fungi also help us to make hard salami, soy sauce, miso, cheese, and all kinds of foods that you've likely come across in your life and would all not be possible without microscopic fungi that help accelerate the fermentation process to give us these delicious food groups. What's really cool is that fungi also help us make a lot of medicine. About 15% of medicines and vaccines currently available are made with the help of microscopic fungi. And we've also discovered a lot of the medicines that we rely on in the day-to-day from fungal species. So, for example, Amanda touched on penicillin. But there's also other antibiotics that have been discovered as being produced by fungi that can kill bacteria and help us treat bacterial infections. So things like strep throat or ear infections, or the antibiotics that you take after getting surgery to help prevent an infection. Also, fungi are known to produce antifungal compounds as well. So, echinocandins are a type of antifungal that's also known to be produced by fungi, and we use those to treat fungal infections. Another really important drug that was discovered to be made by fungi is cyclosporin, and that's an immunosuppressant that has actually enabled organ transplants. So when a patient takes cyclosporin, it can repress their immune system so that they're actually able to take that organ transplant and so that their body doesn't reject it. And without cyclosporin and these other kind of really intense immunosuppressants, we wouldn't be able to have the successful organ transplants that now take place as very common surgeries around the world. You or someone you know may also take something called a statin, which is something that lowers cholesterol. There's many different drug names that fall under that title, but in particular, lovastatin is made by fungi, and that's used very, very commonly around the world as a cholesterol lowering drug. And there's many other medicines that are either produced by fungi or scientists actually engineer the fungi in order to make. So for example, scientists can take baker's yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and get it to produce the human insulin protein. And in a lot of cases, that's how insulin is actually produced and then ultimately used by diabetics in order to treat their diabetes. So lots of ways that although fungi can cause disease, they can also help us treat a lot of illnesses. Some of the really cool things I want to touch on today, and we won't have a ton of time. I know we're running out of time a little bit here, but fungi are also now helping us to make sustainable materials. So there's a couple companies out there that are dedicated to basically turning fungi into the everyday products that we need all around us. So there's a company called MycoWorks and one called Ecovative Design, and they're partnering with companies like IKEA and other big companies to kind of modulate how they approach their sustainability goals. So for example, Ecovative Design is making packaging materials that are made out of fungi instead of styrofoam. And that's being used by IKEA at the moment. Fungi are also being incorporated into sustainable decor. You can see down here light fixtures that are made with the similar mycelium instead of being made out of plastic. And then MycoWorks is making things like mycocomposite, which is a type of building material that's being used to replace different structural components. So it can be used to build types of bricks and other types of building materials that can be used for sustainable development. And then one area that I find really cool, and I'll touch on briefly, is that fungi are also helping us to make leather and other sustainable fabrics, where companies, again, like MycoWorks, are turning fungi into a type of leather that's obviously not derived from animals. And so this is a vegan leather that's also sustainable to produce, can come in a variety of colors and textures, and is now being used by companies as diverse as Hermes and Adidas, who have come up with a concept shoe that uses this fungal leather and is not currently commercially available, but should be in the future, and something that will be very exciting to follow along with. So that's my very brief overview of some of the applications of fungi. I want to leave lots of time for the Q&A and to discuss a little bit about foraging for mushrooms. So please send me in lots of your questions and we'll be able to answer them shortly.